My name is Dennis Chestnut. I am a native Washingtonian, 72 years old, 72 years living here in Washington, D.C. I remember as a child eating what I call eating fresh practically every day. There were markets. One of the main ones was the Florida Avenue Market, where you could buy everything. And then there were also gardens where growing took place. You could turn in almost any direction and find a grocery store at that time.
Communities east of the river in Ward 7 and 8 once had plenty of places to get fresh food, from grocery stores to farmers markets. In the 1950s, larger format supermarkets became more popular at the same time as government policies were subsidizing white home ownership in the suburb and disinvesting from cities like DC. What we saw was a decline in the number of grocery stores in DC. And many residents also began to complain of poor treatment in those grocery stores that remained, as well as low quality of items that were in those stores. And Washingtonians, especially Black Washingtonians, began to rise up, protest, and also start their own alternatives, such as cooperative and nonprofit grocery stores.
My name is Debbie Brown, and my mom was one of the first establishers of the Martin Luther King co-op stores in DC. There was no blueprint. They just decided, these group of women, it's like about 7 of them, and they said, well, we can buy stuff in bulk. And we can, share it with the neighborhood, people that didn't want a whole case of corn, a whole case of peas or whatever. So they sold this idea to the residents of Caper. We can get together and do a little co-op store. The key was to keep the expenses down so that they could make more buying power for the community. So the Department of Housing gave them one of the project, basement spaces. And that's when they started the co-op store. In the back of the store was my mom's office. So that when you came in and you didn't have money to do, you can go back and talk to Miss B and she'd see that you get what you needed during that time. So it was they had to stand the cash register, and she used some of the youth to ring the cash registers. So they learned. It was a learning experience for everybody.
I think the most pressing issue is still the grocery gap. And when we go to public meetings, when we hear from residents, the number one thing that people bring up is fresh food access in their communities. And I think COVID has underscored that even more. Public transportation was limited. People felt unsafe to go far from their home. So not having a fresh food access source near your home was even more of a challenge than it had been in the past.
Yeah, Good Food Markets was really born out of this fundamental belief that the demand for fresh food in so-called food deserts was really undervalued. And that over time, through macro issues like redlining, access to credit, small business loans, education, funding at the federal and local level had created the food apartheid that we were seeing in DC, and huge gaps in life expectancy, over 20 years from the wealthiest ward to the least wealthy ward in DC. When we opened Good Food Markets in Ward 5, obesity rates in that community, Woodridge and Langdon, 25%. Diabetes and heart disease are the leading causes of death. These are all preventable diet-related illnesses. And that's really what Good Food Markets was trying to get at. But there is a fundamental demand for fresh food that is not being met by the supermarket. So Good Food Markets are much smaller stores, around the size of a convenience store that people are used to shopping in, but stocked with those fresh, healthy foods, produce, meat, cheese, dairy. Increasingly, they're alternatives, plant-based alternatives, and everyday cooking essentials, including beer and wine, prepared foods, fresh baked breads, things that you wouldn't find at the convenience store, coupled with real strong community engagement, both to understand what goes in the store, but also to understand how we could have an impact on folks who may not be familiar with fresh, healthy food cooked from scratch at home, because there hasn't been access to a full-service grocery store in our neighborhood in over 20 years.
When we look at our community, we see a lot of corner stores, we see a lot of fried chicken places, we see a lot of fast food places, but we don't see enough fresh produce, we don't see enough grocery stores in communities like Ward 7 and Ward 8, and this really plagues our health. I said, listen, there has to be another way, and there has to be another solution. And for so long, we waited for a big box to come and save us all, but I think really that change comes from within community. When I went to Ghana, I did a teaching program when I was in college, and when I was working in that particular space, I realized that people there had community markets where entrepreneurs would come together and actually create these really sustainable marketplaces, utilizing the help of farmers as well as small business owners. And I thought, hey, we can do the same thing here in Ward 7, and Market 7 was born. Market 7 is a community marketplace that features Black-owned businesses for the purpose of alleviating food and retail deserts in Washington, D.C., and really trying to get into really resolving the food apartheid issue that exists in community.
My name is Dominique Hazard, and I was one of the lead organizers of the 2017 Grocery Walk. The Grocery Walk was about building community power around issues of food apartheid in the city, and it was about putting pressure on our policymakers. The Grocery Walk was a march that started at The Giant on Alabama Avenue, which is the only grocery store in Ward 8, and we walked to Anacostia, which is where I live. And also is a neighborhood that has no full-service grocery store at all. That walk takes about 45 minutes. Obviously, that's unacceptable, right? Like, that's too long. Nobody should have to travel that long to get to fresh food in the city. And so the grocery walk was a really beautiful moment. It was a powerful moment because hundreds of people came out. Hundreds of people came out and said, food access is a priority for us, and we expect solutions.
And so the district, through next year's budget, through the 2022 budget, Mayor Bowser is investing $56 million in a new food access fund that will particularly target new large grocery stores east of the river. And as a companion to that, the Nourish DC Fund, which the district announced earlier this year that I'm helping to implement, is a fund particularly for small DC-owned food businesses.
Today there are new grocery stores under construction in Ward 7 and 8, and we have seen the city take up several of the demands of the grocery walk. So more targeted tax incentives that can hopefully attract more supermarkets to the neighborhoods that really need them, more funding and support for small food businesses and co-ops, and also more money for programs that actually help people purchase food at these stores. So a lot of steps in the right direction.